let's bring in Abdallah Al-Junaid from Manama. Thank you very much for joining us, and good to see you again, Abdallah.
My pleasure.
What could be the outcome, or should we say the positive outcome, of Blinken's visit here to the region?
Well, definitely any diplomatic efforts to de-escalate or contain this crisis will be welcome. But the problem is, would Netanyahu listen to any plea made by friends or allies? Fortunately, he's making it his war of independence at the cost of the Israelis and all future relations and current relations. And we see how even the split have reached the the inner cabinet of the war decision making.
Yes, but you see that Israel has announced today that it's changing its tactics or strategy in Gaza. This is according to a request by the United States. So some things are moving.
Well, the first thing to be judged is, one, we have passed the mark of 90 days. Just a few minutes ago, Hamas still continued to shell Tel Aviv and the other cities. This is one. The death toll have exceeded the 22,000, with total disregard to this number by Netanyahu government. So exactly when we talk about measure taken by this administration, it's need to be translated in humanitarian impact policies. And this, thus far, we don't see that.
Let me bring in Ambassador Dani Ayalon, whom you know from previous discussions here. Ambassador Ayalon, Israeli leadership is trapped in many ways. I mean, there are pressures from the outside, there are pressures from the inside, and there are the hostages. So it's a very hard game to play.
Yeah, let me start, Jacob, by saying, it's always good to be also with Abdallah as a guest of yours. He's his very astute comments are very much appreciated. I also, like him, would like to see a new phase where we see a better humanitarian conditions for Gaza. But as Abdallah mentioned just a few moments ago, we had another barrage. It's very hard to get into, as we mentioned before, until the last rocket. But the continuation of the operation, maybe in different means, is very essential to continue and actually degrade Hamas capabilities, but mostly to render Hezbollah as a non-entity, not in government position in Gaza, and certainly not in any kind of...
You mean Hamas?
Force,
yeah.
Hamas
Yeah.
And the military, absolutely. Now, Netanyahu himself is in a bind, because on the one hand, he has the international pressure, he has American also expectations, but here in his own government, he has his two extreme right-wing ministers that he depends on them politically. Without them, he doesn't have a government, which continue to demand a full-scale operation. Now, the only way out for Netanyahu is if the military itself, and I think here Minister of Defense Gallant is a key person, because if he comes and puts all his credibility on the line and he says, this is now operational needs to move to another phase, and we do have the example from Defensive Shield in 2002. Also, there was an intense fighting for a few months, and then for 2 more years, Jacob, 2 more years, they continued with special ops until they really quelled and, finished with the second Intifada.
Right. To that, I'll add that the IDF spokesman confirmed to the New York Times that the IDF has indeed made this change that Defense Minister was talking about. You want to comment on that, Abdallah?
Well, before I joined, Danny was talking about it's always good to have Danny in the studio, so at least we can continue talking. But Danny was very optimistic in terms of having a Saudi role in the future, the day after in Gaza. Unfortunately, Danny, the Saudis will not step in until Israel really fixed its own mistake. I mean, Gaza and Hamas is a purely an Israeli strategic miscalculation. We have warned everybody about the Islamic, Muslim Brotherhood and its offspring, including Hamas. Unfortunately, nor the American nor the Israeli believe that. And the 7th of October is again an example of a dire strategic mistake. Now, would the Saudis or the rest of the GCC be interested to play a role? Definitely. But could the Israeli at least acknowledge that there is a role officially, not assumptions that the Saudis will come in to fix Israel's problem or mistakes? No. Israel needs to first acknowledge that there is a regional role, and this problem needs a regional cooperation, and 3, that this continuous problem or issue of the Palestinian-Israeli is not sustainable, and it does represent a strategic threat to the whole region, to the whole country. Now, if we cross that bridge, and when we cross that bridge, probably you will see more willingness on the part of the region. And I can assure you, probably at the present time, we can't forsake the Abrahamic Accords, but a time would come very soon if you fail to respond, if Israel failed to respond, that you, the Israeli, will not forsake the Abrahamic Accord.
Danny?
First of all, here again, I must agree with Abdallah about Hamas. It was a major strategic mistake of Israel over the last 15 years. There's going to be a lot of reckoning, Jacob, after the war with a commission of investigations, why the government allowed Hamas to become such a monstrous, strong military machine with the help of Qatar, with the help of many the radical elements in the region. But this is now where
Benjamin Netanyahu, Danny.
Yeah, well, yes, if we check in the last 12 or 15 years, Netanyahu was in power maybe only 1.5 years that Bennett was there, but he was most of the time. I'm afraid it was intoxicating that Israel will gain just quiet by strengthening Hamas. I mean, it was a real crazy idea which just backfire. But this is why it will have to be, whatever phase we are in, whether it's a lower scale, special ops, Hamas can no longer be in Gaza. I think this is something that everybody understands. And I do hope that, the Saudis will have a role, Bahrain will have a role. I don't think we should allow Qatar to take the lead again, because we saw what were the ramifications.
Now, we have just under a minute, Abdallah. A word about the hostages. Can anything be done about that? Because not much is going to happen without it.
Put it this way, Jacob. What Hamas has beside its weapons, it's those hostages. And they're going to hold them as long as they could, turn them into a strategic tools in this negotiation. Unfortunately, this, humanitarian crisis on the part of the Palestinian and the Israelis, it is unjust. And whoever, I wish the Hamas would come to its reasons and release those civilians and accept an exchange, mechanism with Israel.
Some sort of a deal. Abdallah Al-Junaid, it was a pleasure having you again. Thank you very much.